There.
Hello. How are
Oh my,
you?
I'm good. I'm so sorry. Right before we went live, my phone started to die. So I'm like,
Oh no. Better we solve that now than it be
yes.
an issue later. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm so happy you were able to join me tonight to talk about this. When the news broke about the book, I like geeked out hard. I was like, "What? This is such a cool idea. I love this." For those of you who are just joining us and don't know, I'm speaking tonight with Karama Horne. She is the author of the upcoming book Protectors of Wakanda, which is all about everyone's favorite, the Dora Milaje, their history, their training regiment. And I just think this is such a cool idea. So I usually when I do these, I start off by asking people, what was your entry point into comics? But I'm going to be a little more specific. What was your entry point into Black Panther specifically and the larger world of Wakanda?
It definitely was Christopher Priest.
Mm,
I'm one of those people who got into animation before I got into comics.
sure.
But it was Christopher Priest's run that I think is the first that I actually clicked and said it's as opposed to just kind of one offs, because when you're a kid you're just grabbing
Yeah.
whatever you can read. But the one that I remember starting to read in order was Christopher Priest run. I borrowed it from somebody else. Um, and I was fascinated by the fact that the book was
Ooh. Oh, I think I lost your audio there for a sec. Can you hear me? Oh, wait.
yeah
There you are. You're back for me.
middle of it. There you
There we go.
go.
Okay, that should be fine then. I'll take
So
my headphones.
what I was saying Christopher Priest, um, because Christopher Priest's run though was really interesting to me because it was like a Black Panther story that was about Black Panther, but not like told by Black Panther. It was
Right.
told by Ross.
Yes.
And later you heard Priest explain why he did that. It's because he didn't think anybody would accept like a black character, in the lead or
Sure.
whatever. And I just found that fascinating. But yeah, that was why I found it interesting because it was this whole Black Panther run that was somebody else talking
Right.
with
Right.
a lot of Mephisto.
Mephisto in a bathroom, if I remember correctly.
Yes, with a lot of
And
Mephisto in the
it's
bathroom.
yeah, and there's kind of that interesting sort of by putting Everett Ross, I always found as the sort of POV character, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of really get to see Black Panther's status. You really see
Yeah,
like T'Challa as like a king, as this regal figure, and I always thought that was interesting because it does function in the one way, like you said, where it's like, oh, it gets the people who are maybe skeptical about T'Challa on board, but at the other side, you're like, whoa, this dude is in control and like really on top of things.
from every aspect. It was just like
Right.
so. And then later, I think the next one. Now, again, there's been a lot of different writers that have come and gone.
Sure.
The next one I would say that I loved was Jason Aaron's run in the middle of See Wakanda
Yeah.
and Die. See
Yes,
Wakanda
I
and Die.
love that
Just the
story.
thing caught me because everybody was getting caught. It was in the middle of the Skrull invasion.
Right, right.
And everybody was catching it from the Skrulls. All the Avengers caught it. Everybody was a mess. They rolled into Wakanda, and Storm and Black Panther regulated. And I don't think I was so like, because I'd never seen a comic book character do this.
Yeah,
Like I'm an anime fan, and I tell this all the time.
right.
I say this all the time. Like, anime people died. You know what I mean? Like kids died. Like
Sure,
they
sure.
stay killing people in anime and manga. But like Batman just was ridiculous to me because I'm like, he keeps letting them out. Like if he just
Right.
killed one of them, we wouldn't have this anymore.
Right.
But that was like that was the level that we were looking at in See Wakanda and Die. They were killing and torturing these scrolls. And Jason Aaron, the other thing Jason Aaron did in that run that I thought was fantastic, that when I went back and looked at it for my book, he gave the Wakandans names. One of the
Mm.
things that's always bothered me is that everybody in the MCU has a last name but the people of Wakanda.
Right,
They're
right,
all
right.
like, T'Challa, Okoye, meanwhile, we have Thor, Odin's son, the second son
Sure.
of the, you know what I mean? Like,
Right,
Loki's
right.
got two sets of family. two sets of names.
Right. Yeah, that is an odd thing. Like, and yeah, Shuri Wakabi. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why that happened.
It doesn't make any sense. I wasn't allowed to give anybody last names. The only person who got a last name was uh oh my goodness, and her name just went right out of my head. Asura, but everybody knows her as like Queen Divine Justice. But
sure, yes.
They gave her, but they were like, oh yeah, she got a last name because she lives in America. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. It feels like one of those things. It's one of those things where like there are certain things where, you know, God bless Stan and Jack, but like it's one of those situations where you're like, you could tell it was a well-intentioned white person who didn't have the cultural understanding.
He was like, I don't know what we're gonna call them, but
yeah.
Someone was, and I think culturally it's just so strange because traditionally in African countries, people got like 7 names, so that's why it just looks so weird. But Jason Aaron did give, what he tried to do was sort of say, like, you know, somebody of the you know, family of this, or the iron worker of that. He like gave agency to some of the everyday Wakandans that I didn't see again until really Nnedi Okorafor.
Sure.
Her run with Shuri and things like that.
2 very great underrated runs you're talking about right now. That Shuri book that she did, phenomenal. So good. Yeah, that's a great point. You actually mentioned something that I was curious about. Let me ask this question. How did this project come about? Was this something that they approached you about? Did you pitch this whole idea from them whole cloth? How did the idea of doing a book specifically focused on the Dora Milaje, and their history originate?
Okay, so it didn't come from me, because had I had any idea how to do this, I would have done it years ago. They came to me, and it was such a convoluted way. It was like an email that I missed, and then another email, and then it was like the subsidiary of, because it's a YA novel, it's not a comic book.
Sure.
But there is art in it. And so it was from Becker, which is the subsidiary of Simon & Schuster, and they were like, you know, we'd be interested in you writing a Marvel book about the Dora Milaje. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, I don't, which is not what you're supposed to say. So all of you out there who are trying to like manifest all these jobs and things like that, you're right? Like, when you manifest things and they show up, you are not supposed to say, "Are you sure?" You're supposed to say,
"Don't
yes,
give them an out."
Thank you.
Yeah, don't let them second guess it. Yeah,
I messed that part up. But after a little bit of conversation, this same company did a book called The Jedi Manual. And it's got a couple other names. So they were looking to do something similar to the Jedi Manual with the Dora Milaje, which I was excited about, but also terrified about. And I remember getting on a meeting. It was like a Zoom call with like 19 people, because it was like Marvel in this corner, and then Simon & Schuster, and I'm like, wow, okay. If I wasn't scared before, I'm terrified now.
That's very intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it, the whole thing was fascinating to me, but also a little bit terrifying, because I said in that first meeting, the difference between that Jedi book, that manual, was that there's years and years of history between the movies, and also there's, even though there's Star Wars comics, the lore that everybody agrees on is in the movies.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
With the MCU, you've got comics, you've got one-shots, so it was a really interesting conversation when we were getting started about what the source material would be. I was not allowed to source the movies.
Right.
So which means Nakia is not in my book, because Nakia is dead in every iteration in the comics.
Yeah. Current continuity.
But anybody who's looking for Nakia, because they got to know her, and that is the one thing that was making me nervous, because I was like, a lot of people got to know Black Panther from the movies. They are not gonna know what I'm talking about.
Right. But I also feel, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you also have a pretty wide canvas to work in, because unless I'm misremembering, I don't feel like there's ever been a really concrete history of the Dora Milaje laid out in the comics.
Yeah, no, there have. And I'm still waiting for a phone call for somebody saying, yeah, you know that thing you did on page 37, you can't do that.
Right.
But
Right.
but it's going to print, so I think I got away with
it. No issues.
But yeah, so it was very interesting. I remember very early on, and I cannot remember which person said this. I believe it was somebody at Marvel. They were like, "Oh, you have to stick to the main continuity. You can't really explore." I'm like, "Are you kidding?"
Yeah.
I said, "So do more." And they were like, "Well, you can't talk about Doom War." I said, "Then there's half my book because the Midnight Angels came from Doom War."
Right.
Also,
yes.
Jonathan Mayberry run is amazing anyway. But I have to use, and they were like, "Oh," and I'm like, and I've got to talk about when Black Panther was crowned King of the Dead, and that was in an F4 run from Jonathan Hickman.
Right.
So I can't stick to just Black Panther's continuity because y'all didn't write them like that. The Dora Milaje just kind of
popped up everywhere. Yeah.
Right. They just kind of just like the movies. They kind of show up whenever there's a Wakandan issue, and then of course the whole new sentient vibranium that Nega Corp created in her run.
Right.
I was like, listen, so once we got that part together, like, okay, you have to stick with the comics, show us what comics you're trying to pull from, then I was okay. But it was a very I've written long form things before in shorts, and I have pieces in books, but I don't have, this is my first book. And for it to be licensed material, I will definitely write another book. I might even write another licensed book, but it's different because it's like there's a fence. You just don't know where it is until you hit it.
Yeah. Well, and I've always wondered what it's like for people, whether they're writing these licensed books or whether they're writing the actual comics. Like, is it a challenge to put that fence around yourself like you're describing? Do you find that it's creatively restricting, or is it something where you get a new opportunity to approach a story from angles maybe you've never done before?
I think, and it's really hard for me to say this because not only was it my first book, it was my first time working with this company. So there was a lot of first. There was a lot of getting used to the conversation and things like that. And also when you're working when you're working in like the YA space or the kids book space, this isn't kids books, this is YA, but I just mean anything that's in prose. There's a layer of people that don't know the comics that well, that are just sort of okay.
Yeah. As evidenced by the fact that they were like, oh, right, he appeared in other comic books. We forgot about that.
So there are parts of my book that I felt like I was defending like a thesis. Because there were things that like, yeah, I'm sorry, you can't really say that. I'm like, oh, I didn't. 1000 AD Black Panther is not my creation. I didn't come up with two people who caught this vibrating from the air. That wasn't me. There was, I don't know if we can say that about the Jabari. I'm like, oh, I didn't. That was that wasn't me.
You had to have your citations really laid out.
So, and it was really funny. The stuff that I thought they forgot about, they just right over their heads, and like little things. Funny. I'm like, I didn't even do that.
That's so interesting. So what was your research process like then? Because it seems like you came to the table with a lot of knowledge already about what you wanted to write about, but did you find yourself like really digging deep into the long boxes, so to speak? Did you draw anything from real life African culture? What was your research process like?
All of the above. So one of the things I have been fascinated with is in the past 5-6 years, how science fiction and Black history have sort of been dancing around each other, whether or not we're looking at Watchmen or Lovecraft Country, or even some of the smaller films. I had some really interesting conversations in Twitter threads after an episode is over of a show like that, of like, oh yeah, no, that was actually a thing. That wasn't fiction. This was like a thing. So a lot of my book was like that. The other thing that is very interesting about working on a book like this, which was a fictional African country that was created by white men back in the 60s, 70s, actually earlier, and their interpretation of it, and sort of bringing that back, kind of like Ta-Nehisi Coates did.
Sure.
But as an African American, I am first gen, but my mother's from Bermuda.
Mm.
I cannot claim that I am first gen from the continent. So it's interesting. My knowledge of African history is not going to be the same as somebody who's from there, but I definitely wanted to make sure that it was more authentic than a lot of what we had seen. There's even some stuff that Priest wrote. I'm like, oh God, how did we? Okay.
Yeah, Priest likes to push boundaries.
So the first thing I did was, obviously I clearly pulled out Priest stuff, but I also went to Don McGregor. Had to, he created the character. I mentioned Jonathan Mayberry, Jonathan Hickman, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Evan Narcisse, Nnedi Okorafor, I already mentioned.
I'm sure you went
Reginald
to Roxanne
Hudlin.
Gay and World of
Yes,
Wakanda.
Roxanne Gay, Reginald Hudlin. And then of course Jason Aaron. And the interesting thing about the Dora Milaje is I use all of their books, like I mentioned before, Coach Priest Run, Jason Aaron, See Wakanda and Die, and a few other things that he did a little bit later, because he and Hickman danced around each other between the fantastic, that F4 run and the Secret Wars, and there's a lot of
all that new Avengers stuff.
There's a lot of mixing and mingling of, and so it really became a scavenger hunt of finding the last place Black Panther had been mentioned and go, okay, so if that happened, and then when he became the Phoenix for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that did happen. Yep.
Like he had like some powers, and even at the end of, I think it was the end of Secret Wars when he got the Time Stone, and he went back. But the crazy thing is, when he got the Time Stone and he went back, he changed a scene that Hickman had written in F4 years before. So this was like just me. I just had stacks of comics, and I had like a $500 bill from Comixology, and I'm just like going through things trying to find, because one of the things that happened with this character is no one thought in 2018 that Black Panther was going to blow up as big as it did.
Yeah.
So when it did, they were like, oh, and then what started to happen was Marvel started just putting Black Panther and Wakanda in anything that they could find. You know what I mean? Like, and it was just, so he just started popping up everywhere because they wanted people to buy more comic books because they were trying to cash in on that new audience. But it got very confusing canonically. And then in the middle of Coach Run, when they started renumbering everything, that is when I almost like lost it. I'm like, now we're on 183. How did we get here?
Yeah, you go from 20 to 180. Yes, yeah. So, and then it starts again at a number 1 like 4 issues later.
Exactly. And so, and then you also have the 2 Coach runs, the main one, and then the intergalactic one,
yes,
which was really like mind blowing. That is a sci-fi epic right there.
Totally, yeah.
So I came up with those pillars, and then I came up with the decision to, okay, how am I going to connect? How am I going to pull the Dora thread through each of these timelines?
Right.
And it dawned on me that I had to go back. I said, I've got to start with the history. I have to come up with their creation, and I can't talk about their creation or who the first Dora was without going to Black Panther. And that is when I told them, I said, I need a chapter where I talk about the 16 different Black Panther. And a lot of people are not aware that there's 16 of them. But when you total up everything everybody has written, including the 2 women, Nahanda was created by Ta-Nehisi Coates, but Hickman put her in the larger canon with Thor and the earlier Avengers. And then Nnedi Okorafor created another one too. Queen Turkana is another. So you got 16 Black Panthers, and 2 of them are women, and one doesn't have a name because he came out a million years before, because Hickman just decided to throw some people in there. And if I ever meet this man, I swear to God, because when he created that 1 million BC Black Panther, he sort of negated the origins that everybody knew of Bashenga being the first. So in my book, I had to figure out how to connect these two.
So you've been tasked with like cleaning up a lot of continuity.
Oh my god. Oh my god. And then in the middle of me writing it, Vita Ayala, who actually happens to live not too far away from me, Vita had X of Swords and
they
put that whole new sword.
Yeah.
I said, I called them up. I said, listen to me. I've got 10 more weeks to finish this book. I need you to tell me whether or not this sword gets returned, because by the time my book comes out, because right now you've got everybody hating Storm, and by the time my book comes out, if this is solved, I won't know that.
Right.
Because you're not going to finish your run. I was like, I need to know why you came up with this sword, where it came from, and who made it. And they were like, oh, I don't know. I came up with the sword, but I don't know who made it. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I was like, and again, I've been Hickman.
You've got the giant cork board with all the ropes connecting.
Because Hickman did the same thing with Fantastic Four. With F4 rather, when Reed Richards and T'Challa are going into the Necropolis. He doesn't have his powers. Sure, he's now Black Panther. He's going and he's like, I need you to be my witness. And they're walking into Necropolis. He says, oh yeah, that's King so-and-so, and that's King so-and-so, and that's their tombs. I was like, really? Really? So now I got 2 more to add to the list. So that's how the list kept growing. I think at one point we had 17, and I had to have this conversation with Evan Narcissus. I can't say why, but he was like, yeah, no, we have to make it 16. I'm like, but he's like, yeah, we don't talk about it. It's like, Bruno, we don't talk about that one. I'm like, oh, okay.
Amazing. I am so, this is making me even more excited to read this book now, to see that someone, because like you said, the runs have kind of been so sporadic that it's exciting to think that you have now unified this. You've brought it all together. Like, that's so awesome. I'm just gushing about this book now, but it just is very cool to hear.
I didn't think about it until later when somebody asked me very innocently, they're like, oh, is your book going to be used for doing the TV show? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. And I just, because you're so busy in it that you
right.
So part of it was that history. I was really excited to like dive into that and then come up with their origin story, which I can't share here, but I can say that the book does basically explain how the Dora came to be. I know, right? How the Dora came to be. And because everybody thinks Priest invented them, he did invent them. He did bring them. Their first appearances in his book, but is in his run rather. But they were fully grown humans when we met Okoye and the Nakia. So where did they come from?
Right.
And so those were, even though I wasn't allowed to source the movies or the TV shows, there was still that element. But I have to thank Ta-Nehisi Coates, because what Coates was able to do was his comics came out right before the movies, and Coogler used a lot of his stuff. So I was able to sort of weave in and out, like, oh, that's the movies. I'm like, actually, it's not. It's right here in the corner of this issue.
Trust me, don't worry.
Right, as long as I can prove it came from a comic. But I was really interested in where certain things came from. Like, people think there's only 4 of them, and I'm like, that's not possible. In Doom War, there was 500 of them.
Right,
so where did they come from? How were they trained? Where did they learn to use these weapons?
So is this written from the perspective of like you're it's like a Wakandan citizen who has sat down to write out this history? Is that kind of the way it's presented? Like you would pick this up in the Marvel universe?
It is presented as a journal. So it's like journal entries, and it's not a Wakandan citizen. It is I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it without giving away too much of it. Let's see.
I was gonna say, I don't know how much you can talk about, so if you can't say too much, don't worry about it.
I can, because I think one part I already said publicly, so that's why I'm checking. Can I say this? Okay, so no, I can't say this. Okay, so the book is basically it's a found tome. So what the point is, the school that Roxane Gay sort of introduced us to, the school, the book is found sort of after the intergalactic whole war thing, and they're like, all right, look, this is the city's been leveled a couple times. We lost a lot of people here, and off world. We need more Dora, and we need them now. And we probably should have some people that are not all just from the city. We should probably find some other people.
Sure.
So the book is actually old, but it gets added to. So that's what makes it journal entries from a bunch of different people.
Interesting.
So Okoye, when girls go through the Dora Milaje school training academy, if they're accepted, once they go through, they're given their own journal. But every older Dora has to hand, when she graduates, her journal to a younger. And that's how the cycle continues. But because there were so many were lost, not many of these journals exist. And as we all know, the head of the school was killed in Roxane Gay's run.
Mm-hmm.
So Okoye finds one of these tomes and says, you know what, we're going to start this tradition over again. And we're going to use this as our base, the history that we have so far, and we're going to add to it. And so different Dora write different. Queen Ramonda has an entry. Shuri has an entry. All the different Dora write. Not all the different, all the ones that we know, and like some of the leaders of the Midnight Angels. And I introduce a few that have been like tangentially used. Like there'll be a name that's dropped again.
Sure.
Hickman, Narcissus, they do this. He just drops names. So I grab some people that have. There's one character that I created, but they're only in notes. So for instance, just like the Star Wars basically journal that I was mentioning that they were patterning this after, this has notes in the margins that are from different Dora talking about different things.
I love that.
So Asira's voice is going to be a little bit, because she was raised in America, is going to be a little bit different than Okoye. And then so it's a found tome going through basically all of the things that you need to do to train if you're accepted and you live at Upanga on the campus. This is all the things you're expected to learn, to do, your training rituals, all the tests you got to go through, all the languages you got to speak, the weapons training. That was fun. The weapons training, the fight training, and I just had a lot of fun with that part. I think I wrote the weapons first, which was pretty funny. But then
was that idea of the journals being passed down? Is that an entirely original creation of yours, or was that?
Yeah, that was my idea.
I love that idea.
That was my
idea.
So
great. That tradition,
like just the older taking care of the younger, is also a very African tradition, and also Eastern as well. Like even if you look at martial arts, like the older have to take care. So if some of the younger people get in trouble, everybody's catching it because you were responsible for, and that's sort of the concept that I came from. So the book is passed down from elder Dora to younger ones, and I wanted to but in this story, in these little bits of stories, I'm connecting moments, and so there might be somebody who was there was a Dora, let's say, that was I'm thinking of, let's see, Reginald Hudlin's run, when we're looking at not T'Chaka, but his father, Azuri. And, he first meets Steve Rogers. So there were Dora there, but you don't hear that much from them. So there's a Dora that is explaining some things that happened in that fight. Awesome. And then there's another Dora that's talking about what it was like being in the practice room with the Doombots, trying to, overcome all of the obstacles. And then, there's another one that was part of might have been part of like the Nachara Salema. That's like the Wetworks, the secret crew. Right. That's very confused by why we have a book at all, because this is all supposed to be secret,
This sounds like it's really just, I'm like, I was so excited going into this conversation for this book, but you really made this like a treat for people who have taken the time to read all of these Black Panther comics, because I love this. This sounds amazing. And people in my chat are loving it too. They're getting very hyped about it. So amazing. I'm curious though, like there's all this research that went into this. There's all this development that went into it. Was there anything that kind of surprised you as you were writing this? Like anything that you thought like, oh, I never thought of looking at the Dora Milaje this way, or anything that just kind of caught you off guard that you weren't expecting going into this book project?
After getting the okay to talk about 16 different Black Panther. Like that was my thing. I'm like, really? Okay. Because a lot of people might not know this, but Evan Narcisse has another book coming out. I think it's already up on Amazon called the Wakanda Atlas. And that's dropping in September as well. Yeah. And it's going to be like this whole like map of all the, I mean, I haven't seen it. This is what the description says. So
this is news to me. That sounds awesome.
So I'm kind of terrified because I'm like, oh my God, his book comes out first. But I was really fascinated. Like once I was able to make sure that I had the history together and write and stuff, it was really cool I was excited about like, there are, for instance, in that fantastic fun F4 run of Hickman's, where he makes Bast makes T'Challa King of the Dead. He then gets that Avatar state where he can see all the other Black Panthers, right?
Yes.
And so, but I was like, who are these people? Like, we got a lot of people that just show up and talk and yell at him. Like, certain ones we knew, his father, his grandfather, even a few extras that had been mentioned. But then there's some people that are just sitting there and I'm like, what's his name? You know, so it was really kind of cool to come up with, connect the dots between some people that had been mentioned and not seen in certain comics. Same thing with Adora, as well as people who had been seen but not heard in others, and put like faces to names and little stories, you know. So that part was exciting. And then also building out how the Dora worked. I'm a fan of martial arts movies. So like I was up Sunday mornings with my brothers watching all the Kung Fu films and everything. So I was like, okay, so if, you know, of course, we're going to have like, you know, Taekwondo and things like that in here, that's great. But we should also have like Nguni stick fighting, and we should have capoeira, and we should have like, from all across the diaspora, different types of fighting techniques. And then I found out there's like a stick fighting technique on like almost every continent. Wow. And I was like, that's fascinating. Like just little things that you don't think of. And so and also the other thing that I was allowed to toy with were things that existed that I could sort of play with, the concepts. So for instance, Okoye always says she doesn't like guns, you know, so primitive. But one of the reasons why she doesn't like guns, and which is one of the reasons why Agents of Wakanda has to work differently than the rest of the I think not the MCU, but really the way the other agents work, is that if you're looking at something as specific as vibranium, and you make a vibranium bullet. Now, vibranium is very rare. Everybody wants to get their hands on it so they can repurpose it for their nefarious means, right? So if you have a vibranium bullet, that means every time you use it, you got to go get it.
So, I had never thought of it that way before, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So if Okoye
just shooting that off into nothing and leaving it there. Yeah.
Exactly. Okoye doesn't like it maybe because I just hate guns. Io and Anika's like, I don't like this because I don't like pulling bullets out of dead bodies. You know what I mean? Like, so there's like a practical.
Right. You know, logistically a nightmare.
If you don't want vibranium just randomly ending up in different parts of the planet,
right?
You got to go get those bullets. That's
right. That's such a great little practical thing that I don't think I ever sat down to think about, but it's the kind of stuff that in books like this I love to see, where someone took the time to be like, wait a second, you can't just be shooting vibranium off into the air, because everybody would just snatch it up and take it. Yeah, no, that's
not how
makes a lot of sense.
And then, like, the other thing that Nnedi Okorafor did that, like, nobody talks about, and it blows my mind, it's like she invented another form of vibranium, the Mimic 27,
right?
And you can time travel with it. Why? I shouldn't say time travel. You can't time travel. You can open portals.
Right.
Like, why are we not all using this? What's happened? Like, we can get, like, it still exists. We can go to Krakoa with it. Like, why?
Right.
Why are we not?
Well, and this is, you've hit on a funny thing that I think about with superhero comics a lot, whether it's Hickman or Okorafor, where they'll throw out these crazy concepts, but because there's so many comics every month, people will just kind of be like, oh yeah, that happened, we're going to just keep moving on, and new crazy concepts are going to get introduced. So it's amazing that you've been able to say, like, we need to stop and take a breather and really look at this and consider the implications here of what this means.
Yeah, and like in Nettie's run on Shuri, first of all, Shuri fought a whole ass insect.
A giant insect, yes.
And it was a giant insect that was like attracted like to music, to vibrations.
Music, right.
And I was like, okay. And I remember saying like, oh, they have to. That portal is by the Groot Boom tree, and basically, her consciousness ended up fusing with Groot, and then it was like, I am Shuri, and it was great. It was nuts. I was like, how did we get here? But you know what's really funny? This is what I thought this is one of the most surprising things I found when I was researching that. The Groot Boom tree exists. That's where the story started. There is a sub-Saharan African tree that is called a Groot Boom that exists. Wow. And so I was like, well, guess what's going in the middle of the hello.
Amazing.
So there was just all kinds of things that I would find out. So that was the funny part. They were like, well, you can't really make up a tree. I'm like, I didn't. Somebody else did.
I love how much you had to be like, no, this is a real thing that's already happening, or no, this happened in the comics.
It was sort of like explaining to your parents, like, but are you sure that you're not? No, I'm telling you, that is not the made up part.
Amazing.
I did not make her fight a gigantic insect. That was not me.
I'm just reporting back. This is what
That's
happened.
That's what I'm saying. Don't shoot the messenger.
Well, I think that people are going to be so excited about this book because I feel like, I mean, obviously since the film, but the Dora Milaje have become such breakout characters, you know. And I'm curious to know what is it to you, or what is it in your mind that you think has made them so popular among fans, among the public? Like, what is it about them that just sort of sparked people's imaginations?
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of many things. I think, well, first of all, I think most people, like the general public, didn't know who they were until they saw, you know, Black Panther the movie.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the cast members, like, you can't put any of these people in a movie and not go, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, they look so stunning and they look so amazing. But I also think, just like Black Panther, we were waiting for superheroes. And I think that the thing that people also, there's a different kind of way we look at heroes that aren't born with powers and aren't given some type of serum. So, for instance, there's a different way. Like Captain America, we all know, like, he's amazing, you know, great boy, but he's got that serum.
Right.
Tony Stark, it's a little different because he doesn't have a serum. In fact, he's an alcoholic and he messed up a bunch of times, and you know, everything he's kind of built his way up. So there's something to be said for characters like the Dora who train to literally protect a man that has powers.
That has powers, yes.
Like, so that concept is really fascinating, but I think the look and their mystique is what was I think from the very first time Io showed up in Falcon and Winter Soldier. I'm not Falcon and Winter Soldier, I'm sorry.
Civil War.
Civil War.
Yeah.
And told Natasha, like, you need to move, basically. Move or be moved. But you need to get out of the way. People have been like, but who's that though?
Right.
And so I think that has been the mystique. But I also did that with a lot of my storytelling. Like, for instance, in Falcon and Winter Soldier, when Io is sort of deprogramming White Wolf, aka, you know, Bucky, and he's been there for a minute, she's talking him through, and they're going through some type of ritual. What kept going through my head is, where'd she learn that? Where's that from?
Sure.
How are they trained in mind control? How do they know this?
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm always like looking, just how do they do that guy back there? How does he do that? So that's kind of what I was doing when I was coming up with concepts for the book. And I think the mystique is that these women are there, they are security, but they seem to know everything.
Right.
Like they can speak multiple languages.
It wasn't until you said that just now, but you almost would have to know everything to survive in that universe in the position that you're in. In such a absurd, wild universe with superpowers and gods and mind control. If you're just a regular person and you're entering that sphere, you have to know everything.
Exactly. And I feel like if you don't, like, one of the things I did in the story, I can share this, is the girls can't graduate unless they can speak fluently at least 7 languages.
Wow.
And then another 4 on top of that. Because there's a reason why they can be everywhere.
Right.
But also, what does it mean to be everywhere? Like, every single person is not flying the plane. Every single person isn't, and then I went back to Jumor again, Myra, she was an amputee, and she was a Dora that was put into Pride, which was the Princess Regent Intelligence Division. And she worked alongside Shuri for a long time in terms of technical. And I'm like, that's gotta happen. Like, someone's gotta get a leg blown off every now and then. Where do they go? How do you age out? Like, if you don't die, how do you age out?
Right. What's the retirement?
What happens? Because you know secrets. They can't just let you go. Like, are they
right.
throw you into the volcano? What are they gonna do? So
amazing.
It was the concept of these incredibly, I think somebody said in the chat, yes, these incredibly strong women, but who are only seen as strong. And that was the thing that also struck me. I used, there's these 5 tenets of the Dora Milaje. Now, it's funny, I would love to say I came up with these, but Disneyland made them. So a lot of people know about the Dora Milaje in LA, I think it is. Sorry, in California.
My wife, actually, she works for a costume shop, and they made the costumes for the park.
Oh my God. Yeah. We are going to have a conversation because there is cosplay in my future. I need to send her some drawings. But yeah, they have these tenets, tradition, honor, strength, courage, and compassion. And I love that because I think people just think of them as warriors. But I really wanted to also look at the compassion side and what courage is. Courage isn't always a fight. Courage sometimes is knowing when not to fight and when to listen and when to, there's a reason why Okoye is always like, okay, T'Challa, do whatever it is you're gonna do. We'll be here. You just, I know you're messing this up, but okay. And I think that was the pull for me. Everybody knows them as incredibly strong, powerful warrior women, but you can't stay at that point and not break. So what's the reset? How do they, how do they mourn? How do they relax? How do they heal? And we even saw during Coates' run what happened when Asira was taken over mentally. And one of the things that even was said in that book, the Dora was like, see, if she had been trained with us, this wouldn't have happened. She doesn't know how to fight this. And I was like, right. How do you fight that, though? So it was coming up with ways of, so not just being able to use all these weapons and look really cool doing it, but also know how to get out of harm's way and how to hear and listen and observe and the different ranks. That was also very important to me. Like, not all the Dora get to walk with the royal family. Somebody's got to fly the plane. Somebody's got to take care of the Midnight Angels jet. Like, where are these?
Right.
Who's doing this? Who's in the hangar making sure that all the weapons are okay? Like, so these were all the questions that I was asking.
All those world building questions that you have to really stop and think about. Yeah. Awesome. I went into this conversation excited for this book, and now I'm like over the moon elated about this. I'm so excited to get my hands on this thing. I wanted to ask you one final question, though, because obviously once this book comes out, this will be the definitive text on the Dora Milaje.
I'm
easily.
hoping. We don't know though.
But I wanted to ask, like, for everybody watching who maybe have some familiarity with Black Panther comics or maybe are a novice to them, what stories or runs would you recommend that you feel like exemplify the best of not only T'Challa but the Dora Milaje and that world in general?
I think you're going to. You definitely need to read Black Panther Volume 3, Number 1, which is Christopher Priest's introduction of the Dora, because you need to see where they came from. You just need to know.
Yeah.
If you don't read anything else, I would just read that so you have a concept. Although it is a fun run until we get to the weird part of him losing his mind and then
so a lot happens
out of body experience. That was by the time we get to the end of that, I'm like, are you okay? I would definitely read See Wakanda and Die, because it's
that
just
double
so
page
much
spread.
fun.
That double page spread when they send the ship back to the Skrull homeworld and it's just a bunch of dead Skrulls.
Yep.
That's the stuff. You love it.
Yeah, spoiler alert, it's in the title.
Yes. Like, you know what you're getting when you get into this.
Like, if F Around and Find Out was a comic.
No, exactly. 100%.
I also really am fascinated, and I think not so much Dora, but a very interesting story is the F4 run that Hickman did with, and you know what, let me be more specific. Jonathan Mayberry's Doom War is definitive Dora Milaje stuff.
Great stuff.
Dora Milaje, what they do, how they do, the numbers that they have, the creation of the Midnight Angels and Deadpool. Yes. Dora Milaje and Deadpool. That is a fascinating thing to read and also get some history, because then after that, when F4 is out, which was later a Hickman run, and Shuri is queen, and T'Challa becomes King of Wakanda. That's a really interesting combination, because we only know him as the King of Wakanda. We only know him as the Black Panther. When that mantle is given to his sister, but he's still in the picture, it's a really interesting way, and it's a really interesting conversation about how they maintain, even when after everything, after they've been attacked, and that was before Thanos. This is all Doom War and Namor.
Mm-hmm.
After Thanos, and then of course the Ta-Nehisi Coates run. I would also Nnedi Okorafor. The only thing that bothers me about the way this run was let out is because they dropped it as a bunch of number ones, so people didn't realize it was all a connected series.
Oh, so, I think I know the one you're talking about.
The Wakanda Forever run she did.
Yes.
That was all Dora Milaje, but it was Wakanda Forever number 1 with Spider-Man. And then it was Wakanda Forever number 1, Avengers. And then it was like X-Men. And then it was Avengers. And I was like, people are not connecting the fact that this is all one story.
Right, yeah.
But it is a beautiful, beautiful run. And it also shows a lot of the young training that they went through.
Mm-hmm.
And it connects beautifully, I think, with Roxane Gay's run, World of Wakanda, and which basically it's really Io and Anika's story, but it also works really well with some of the homegrown unrest that was happening in the Black Panther run. And I think that was one thing that I loved about Coates' run, is that if he's always not home and he's always taking care of the Avengers and out, what's happening in Wakanda? And I think that was what was so amazing, because when all that unrest happened and after Namor attacked and they were rebuilding, he still wasn't there.
Yeah.
And them all coming back together to try and rebuild. And then to see him, because we had the tangential story of, was it Infinity? Where he actually had to team up with Namor. And they were sure, he's like, really? Like, the man who just killed we're going to do this?
Right.
all of those stories are really fascinating. So I would say start in the 90s and go with some of the Christopher Priest stuff, and then jump forward to the mid-aughts to get some of the Jason Aaron, Jonathan Hickman stuff, and then definitely read the Ta-Nehisi Coates, Roxane Gay one to get your history. But I will keep saying that See Wakanda and Die is one of the top. One of my most favorite comic runs, period. And just because how just relentless it was, and you really thought at one point that T'Challa and Storm were gonna die.
It's a crazy story.
Oh my God, the way he brought that, the way he did that reveal, I was like, "Yep, I wasn't ready." And that I still get that thing in my chest, like I'm shook, like I read it the first time just talking about it.
No, those are all amazing picks. Amazing picks. I especially really love the Coates run and the way, like you said, all the political world building that goes into that story and the questioning of what is T'Challa's place in Wakanda if he is also an Avenger and all these other things. I've said this in previous TikToks, but that's the one where he really feels very Shakespearean as a character for me, which I really enjoy. Appreciate.
And then the whole, and the funny thing is, the intergalactic story is shades of Priest, because it's somebody else telling it at first.
Right, yeah.
Because he can't remember who he is.
Right.
And I also found that really I found that fascinating. And I also love the fact, and a lot of people got pissed at that comic. And I said, no, it's not a really good hero unless you make them an anti-hero. You got to do that.
Sure.
Like,
and I think that story also reads a lot better together. I think people were frustrated by it month to month because it was very serialized. Yeah. But I think reading it all in one sitting, it flows a lot better, and it's an amazing story, like you said.
What's your favorite?
I really love Don McGregor's original run, because that was like the first thing that I read that was Black Panther related that got me into the character. Mm-hmm. So when they first announced the movie and they were like, Killmonger's the villain, I was like, all right, this is gonna be something else. And it's Don McGregor's art is great, but I also just am blown away by Don McGregor's art. Don McGregor's writing is great, but Billy Graham's art is like what really seals it for me. The way he does the splash pages, and if you've ever want to see Black Panther fight a Tyrannosaurus Rex, like, oh my God, stunning artwork. That is just
prehistoric Black Panther is everything.
Yeah. But I'll also second your recommendation. The Priest run is amazing. The Jason Aaron run is great. I also really liked, it's not technically a Black Panther run, but there was a brief run where Dwayne McDuffie wrote Fantastic Four, and Storm and T'Challa were on the team. So if you've ever wanted to read not only Dwayne McDuffie writing Fantastic Four, but Dwayne McDuffie writing Black Panther, that is a great little run to check out. I like that one a lot too.
And you know what? I could ask you this, because people think I'm making this up. Again, all I do is try, like, I didn't come up with this. But when they announced that Killmonger is going to be in Black Panther 2, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't have any inside track on this at all. I'm totally asking from a comic book perspective.
Right.
And I said, the only connection that I can currently see is that there was a point, and I don't remember if he became fully conscious or if he was a zombie or what, but somebody in the 10 Rings revived him. And I don't think it was Shang-Chi. I think it was his father, right?
Right. It was definitely his dad, because it would have been... Because if it had happened... Was this something that happened around the Priest run time, or was this something that happened more recently?
It was like in that weird... I feel like it was around the Priest run time, but I don't think Priest wrote this.
Because if that did happen, it would have been before... It would have been like before they've like really associated Shang-Chi's father with the 10 Rings. But I think you are correct. I think I do remember a story with maybe it was even the Mandarin specifically. It was either the Mandarin or
I think you're right. I think it was the Mandarin. I think it was the Mandarin specifically. Now, for obvious reasons, they're not going to bring back the Mandarin. Right. But I think it would be interesting if it was a situation where Shang-Chi was forced to revive Killmonger in order to save either Wakanda or something else. I think that would be fascinating.
That would be pretty interesting. That would be pretty interesting. They do love throwing together characters that we would never think would go together. And that would be a pretty interesting team up to check out. Yeah, for sure.
It would be. And it's just, there's so many things. Like, I really wanted Shuri to be Black Panther, but it's not looking like she's going to be, which is weird.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, and outside of the storyline, like, we kind of know what's happening, but the fact that, like, M'Baku, the actor who plays M'Baku Winston Duke, just got a ton of money and now has got an extended role. I'm like,
but it's also, you've got Nakia right there, who I think could fit in the role nicely. I'm also, when this conversation always comes up, I always very mixed feelings about it, because I can respect what they're doing with the fact that they don't want to recast, but then there is also a part of me that's like, if they did recast, I wouldn't be like opposed to it, just because I think T'Challa is such a great character. I'd be sad to not see him appear in the films again. It's hard to talk about because you just don't know. I just feel like there's no good solution, and I feel bad for everybody creatively involved there, because that's an impossible situation to be in.
Yeah, there's absolutely. But one thing I will say, I know there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh, recast T'Challa, recast T'Challa,"
yeah.
And I need, again, this is me looking for those little lines to like. Wait, I'm reading between them. They keep saying they are not going to recast T'Challa. That does not mean they won't recast the Black Panther.
Interesting.
And so I keep having to explain that, like, don't worry about them not recasting T'Challa. I don't have a problem with that. If they want to just put T'Challa to rest, that's okay.
Right.
Because, somebody in the chat just said it. There is a multiverse. In the multiverse, Storm and T'Challa had a child.
True.
He had power. They had 2 kids, daughter and a son. Yeah. What's good? Yeah. Why can't we see them? Why can't we see, since, look, the live stream that I had before this was about Morbius. Trust me, anything is possible.
I don't know if that's the template we want to follow.
No, it's not the thing that we want to follow on, but the fact that, like, you have Sony, who's outside the Marvel universe, using this fractured universe to bring in people that don't make any sense.
Sure.
Surely the MCU and Feige, who do have control of the situation, could find a way to make this work. Also, we were introduced to alternate universe everything in What If.
Right. And I would argue best episode of that show is the T'Challa episode, in my opinion. And I kind of like that show more than most people, because I kind of like that it was like a little goofy and silly, because it felt like those old What If comics that are kind of goofy and silly. But that T'Challa episode, I think, was top tier. It's phenomenal. So shows that can be done. It's just a question of how they go about it.
And that's the other reason why I really like a lot of the novels and like the lore that are outside. Like when you look at Star Wars and even the work that, I'm doing, Evan's doing, Preeti Chibber is doing. Like, Preeti Chibber's written like 4 or 5
so many.
They're amazing. And they're amazing. And it's like, it's canon, but like, let's just stretch our, stretch the creativity a little bit.
Yeah.
And tell some really interesting stories. And I think that's why What If did so well. I don't know. I really like Loki for some of the same reasons. Like, it was just kind of outside, although I'm a Doctor Who fan and it felt very Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. I think if you like Doctor Who, you're kind of pre-inclined to like the show, which is just Doctor Who, but with Loki a little bit.
Exactly.
No, and I very much am somebody who subscribes to the, not to bring up the distinguished competition, but the DC hyper time concept of like, everything is continuity if you want it to be. Just let it be whatever it is. If you like that story and that story matters to you, then it's canon, then it's continuity. Don't worry about it.
No, I completely agree. And I'm excited for this. Well, first, I'm just excited for the book to come out, because there have been like paper issues and things like that, like just practical life stuff that we can't control. So I'm gonna be, every month that passes that the drop date stays the same, I'm excited, because I keep thinking someone's gonna be like, oh, we ran out of ink in China and now your book has because that keeps happening.
Crazy.
But I feel so honored and so lucky to have been able to work on this book. And I think the thing that makes me really happy is that I've got a baby niece. She's like 3,
Oh.
and I can't wait to be able to say, like, it's probably a little too violent for a 3-year-old, but there's some pictures in it. But I can't wait to be able to, be like the cool aunt when she's 10 and be like,
Totally.
well, I wrote this. This is the thing that I did.
Oh yeah, she's gonna be bragging about you to everybody when she can. No, that's definitely gonna happen. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And the book is released in September?
September 13th, yes. And
okay.
It's available for pre-order now. You can click the link in my profile and it will take you, you'll see it right at the top of my beacons. You'll be able to order it. And there's different places to order. Some people don't want to order from Amazon. They want to order from Barnes and Nobles. You can do that. And I also have a list of about 17 Black bookstores and comic shops that you can order from as well. So I'm asking everybody to try and buy 2, because 1 obviously helps my numbers if you get it from one of the major stores, but I also really want to help one of the smaller shops as well. Totally. I will be doing a virtual tour and a physical tour, but awesome. I do in September, but the virtual one's going to be before that. Right. There will absolutely be a book signing though I'm in New York, but there will be a book signing in Philadelphia at Amalgam Comics and Coffee.
Amazing. I follow them on TikTok. They're great.
They're amazing.
Go check them out.
And if you haven't been to that shop before, it's amazing because it's huge and you can't really get coffee and just chill out. But that will be in September. I don't know what date yet. But if you do follow me on social and then follow me, there's also a way to like get on my mailing list and stuff, and then you can stay abreast of what's going on. And I also think that if you can, I also have pieces that dropped in February in Marvel's Voices. Yes. And Marvel's Voices Legacy, like the big collected edition. So if you have a chance, please check them out, because there's a lot of other incredible people that are creating stuff in those. Yeah,
those are always a great read.
And definitely. I always tell people, try to, whenever you see a comic book, like if it's an annual or if it's some type of anthology, pick it up, because a lot of these artists and writers are doing amazing things elsewhere, but you won't know about them. So like, read the book and then go Google them and see what else they're doing, because there's some really incredible creative. I don't have to tell you, because you always do it.
But you're right. Like, just to co-sign on that, I've found so many amazing writers and people like that. Like Stephanie Williams is one. Like, I discovered a lot of her work through that, and now she's writing Nubia, and she's got all kinds of cool stuff coming up. So she's a great example of that. Totally, yeah.
I can share that Aletha Martinez, who's done a lot of her artwork, did do some art for my book. So
awesome!
Yeah, that's great. One of my mandates. I wasn't able to get everybody I wanted, but I was like, well, the other reason why I wanted to get this is what I was able to sell them on. Aletha is one of the original artists on the Dora Milaje. She was oh my goodness. She was one of Joe Quesada's art assistants back when Priest was working. Right, so she actually drew the original Dora.
Huh. That's awesome. That's perfect.
Yeah. So when the book, so sometimes remember I told you they kept asking me, "Are you sure?"
Right.
Like, right. Do I know what they look like? Ask Aletha. She drew them at that time.
That's so cool. I didn't even realize that. That's amazing. That's perfect.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of as we get closer, there'll be more surprises and things that come out of the book. Awesome. But I'm very excited about not just what I was able to do with the comics, but some of the real world history I was able to like sift in there. And I really look forward to I'm going to definitely write some pieces about okay, so this actually happened in real life, because
I cannot wait to see this. The annotated
I love
version.
finding those bits of history.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to talk to me. I am so excited to read this book. Go pick it up. To anybody who's watching, pre-order it now. I'm gonna get 2 copies. I'll have one for my classroom at school. Aww. It's gonna be great. But yes, thank you so much. And we'll definitely chat again when the book comes out. I would love to talk some more.
Absolutely. And this was my first TikTok live, so thank you.
It went perfectly. There were no issues at all at any point.
Except for that time my mother called in the beginning. Sorry about the audio. Oh my God.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you to everybody who's watching. Bye-bye.